Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This time it will be a more compressed build and benchmarks video than what I usually put out because it's a redo of sorts. You see, the last build I made had the Ryzen 7700 with the RTX 5070, and while I was happy with both the looks and performance, I was a bit underwhelmed by the price. Most of the issue came from the fact that I overspent on the 5070 I purchased from CX, so to redeem myself I'm going to try to hit about 90% of the performance while looking the same or better. Now this is still an AM5 build, no I haven't had to resort to AM4 or 12th gen Intel, but I will be using a Ryzen 7500F, which despite what you might think based on the name alone is simply a Ryzen 7600 with a disabled iGPU, which means it's within 5% of a 7600X while being a bit cheaper. I have run into resistance in the past trying to convince people of the relative merit of CPUs, but in my opinion seeing is believing, so the benchmarks should speak for themselves. This board you're seeing is an open box ASUS Prime B650 with a universal IO shield. I did manage to find a shield for it in the meantime, but since the PC has already been built, I will not take it apart just for that. And for the NVMe drive, I went with Samsung OEM one that I believe came out of a laptop that was upgraded. Oftentimes customers want to order a cheaper machine and the PC shop swaps in a larger capacity SSD, so they end up with a sizable amount of OEM only brand new drives that are always welcome for a decent price. And finally, the memory kit you see me putting in is not what I'll be using. As it so happens, from time to time some CPUs fail to play nicely with certain kits of RAM. It can be that you can swap the CPU to an identical one, it will work just fine as the controller is slightly better, or swap the RAM kit. In this case I ended up swapping the RAM kit with a non-RGB one from the same brand, and after about a week of intense testing I concluded that it's all good. It did make me realize that a few years ago this was a very common occurrence, especially with Zen 1 and Zen Plus. I used to have a bunch of kits from different brands on hand because you can never tell with the Silicon Lottery, but this is simply the first time I've encountered this on AM5 after, well, a lot of builds. And I should mention that the incompatible RAM kit was subsequently used in a 7700 build and it was rock solid as expected. For the cooler, I've chosen a Thermalright with nice RGB accents, and you are seeing me here install its hardware. It does gurgle a bit when first starting, certainly more than I ever experienced from other Thermalright products, but it's almost brand new, so I decided to take it apart and add some deionized water just in case it left the factory underfilled. But no, that was not it. What the issue was in the end was that this particular cooler is best suited to be powered from a normal header with much lower PWM that you would expect. Running at about 30% PWM duty almost instantly cleared the bubbles, and even when under stress going to 100% it was still perfect. What a weird design choice for a pump head and jet plate so the bubbles clear quickly only at lower pump RPM. Ish. I did test it with the pump going full bore and it took about 4 minutes to clear up after being tipped on its side. Although this board is a plus, not a plus Wi-Fi, there isn't really anything stopping me from adding a Wi-Fi card into the unused M.2 Wi-Fi slot, so I went ahead and did just that. Because my card doesn't have the exact securing shield, I opted to route the antennas to the bottom I/O next to the GPU as it is convenient. The case everything is going into is a pre-dressed Gamemax with a vertical GPU bracket. That wasn't necessary, but as we shall see shortly, the GPU I've chosen has very nice RGB and I didn't want to waste it. Now about the GPU, I went back to our old friends at CX, but this time I got a much more reasonable price RTX 3080 that of course comes with their 5-year warranty. Furthermore, it's never been taken apart and the temperatures are some of the best I've ever seen for a 3080. Better than some really high-end models like the Aorus Monster, come to think of it. I am super impressed by this PNY Accelerate card, but I wish the RGB software was just a tad better. It does the job well enough, but it's not exactly super user friendly. The card itself though looks phenomenal. Well, in my opinion. Have a look. I've now finally decided to retire Heaven because after the 5090 video it became clear it is time. It has had an amazing run for any benchmark. It is a ridiculous 16 years old this month and that is absolutely crazy. With 212 FPS on average, there really aren't any surprises here as it's broadly in line with expectations. As far as replacing candidates go, I am thinking of bringing back Superposition because for the longest time I had it alongside Heaven, but I felt it duplicated information. But equally, something like Thermalright is also a good idea to flush out any edge case issues. 3D mark we got 4611, which is higher than I expected, especially with recording. While not so familiar with 3D mark as I am with Heaven, I usually expect it to be around 3 to 8% lower to recording, but this is bang on. Rocket League this time hasn't gone as I expected it to. I mean, 250 FPS isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's just it's about 100 FPS lower than expectation. So I just recorded it and moved on. While writing the script, I fired up the game, I did a 50 megabytes update, and then yeah, double the frame rate. This is my big issue with Rocket League. It's so inconsistent, it's very difficult to trust anything it puts out. Fortnite did very well at 101 FPS on average on the Rocket test track with balanced DLSS. Over the years, this has become a very hard game to run at max settings to the point that I felt compelled to bring DLSS down to balance to get over 100 FPS. Yes, the settings are silly and most competitive gamers will not enable any of the performance tanking features like RT, but I don't care about any of that, I just want the worst case scenario. Horizon Forbidden West, my little run around circle, averaged 96 FPS while looking stunning. I am a bit annoyed I haven't gotten around to playing this game properly, and every time I fire it up for a benchmark I salivate a little just by looking at the vistas. Black Myth Wukong ran very well with 52 FPS on average. In game with just a little bit of adjusting you can easily get to 60 or 75 FPS. Here the fact that the 3000 series RT cores are 2 generations old now shows. That's the bad news. The good news, it is comparable to 9070 XT, which is roughly double the price, so that makes it incredibly difficult to complain. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying here the 9070 XT is the more powerful card, because it is, but in this particular case, RT almost triples the Radeon by comparison. Scale back ray tracing and the 2 generations newer Radeon, well, it just runs away with it. I still don't know what the issue is with Assassin's Creed Shadows. I am beginning to suspect that my test drive install might have some sort of bug because the GPU power draw is so laughably low, I just can't figure it out. In the beginning, I did suspect some sort of CPU RAM bottleneck, but both of those usually come to light in fellow Ubisoft stablemate Farcry 6, which in this case did not indicate any issues. Without recording, the GPU power draw and utilization were consistently high, returning 101 FPS, and with recording, bringing it down to 93, which is normal as a portion of it is dedicated to feeding the built-in video encoder. So in this case, this is a dead end. It does not explain anything about what is going on with Assassin's Creed Shadows. In Dragon Age, in the intro opening scene, the FPS did not climb as far as 60, hovering instead at an average of 52. Now, that is to be expected, as this is, as far as I can tell, one, if not the most demanding scene in the game, with FPS during normal gameplay being somewhere in the mid-80s. Significantly more than here, where every particle effect is seemingly going off at once, which incidentally is what makes it a great benchmarking scene. Okay, so I'm a bit annoyed that Indiana Jones presents different settings depending on the GPU. I get why they do this, but it's also very disorientating for me. With high settings but without a crazy RT, we are getting over 110 FPS on average into the intro walk, which I feel makes the perfect case for this GPU. But then again, I would still like the option of turning on the crazy RT, please. And last but not least, Cyberpunk 2077, which averaged 58.5 FPS while recording. Naturally, this goes over 6 FPS when not recording. Apart from path tracing, everything on here is at ultra and using the new DLSS that relies on the newer algorithm, so this result is a little lower than expected for 3080, but it does have the upside that the presentation has been improved. Now, having both options presented is, I believe, a very good thing, Indiana Jones, as it allows individual users to tinker and play around with settings. You know, one of the cornerstones of gaming on a PC as opposed to a console. And on that cheery note, this video is over. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one.